Good morning, everyone. Thank you for our viewers. I would like to welcome you to a new series of editions in our panels on the Three Cs Initiative under the framework of the Three Cs Initiative Partnership. We have today and would like to welcome a very good expert, a fantastic individual as well, Martin Vargulis from the Latvian Institute of International Affairs. I would like to also welcome Owen McNamara, PhD researcher who currently sits in Estonia, and Maciek Szostak, who is our in-house expert in Poland affairs. Welcome, gentlemen. As this panel mainly deals with Polish-Baltic relations under the framework of the Three Seas Initiative, I would like to begin by firstly introducing the Latvian perspective. Now, why the Latvian perspective? Well, as we should be familiar with, recently this year we had the Three Seas Summit in Riga. So, Martins, welcome. Could you please give us a brief introduction about the Latvian current and expected perspective on the Three Seas Initiative, please?
Good morning. Hopefully you hear me loud and clear. So on the Latvian perspective, and first of all, thank you for having me. It's always glad to speak with like-minded countries and colleagues, and definitely partners or representatives from the nations of Three Seas Initiative, and especially from Poland and three Baltic states are the most like-minded countries, and especially during the challenging times that we are living, I think it's of utmost importance to discuss such an issues. Indeed, as Katya already pointed out, one of the biggest events when it comes to the foreign and security policy of Latvia in 2022 was related to Three Seas Initiative. We started to organize, or it was announced that we will host Riga, that Riga will host Three Seas Initiative Summit in 2021, and from that point, I would argue that this also stimulated the um, the interest, or that facilitated, stimulated discussions on particular interests of Latvia when it comes to the Three Seas Initiative, and that was coordinated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a lot of stakeholders were involved, including, well, politicians, diplomats, representatives from the business environment, governmental and non-governmental institutions, think tanks, including Latvian Institute of International Affairs that I am representing today as well. And when we started to discuss among the stakeholders what are the interests, or why Latvia should participate and be present, or even to facilitate the further development of the Three Seas Initiative, from the outset, it was clear. First, it's all about geopolitics. I mean, taking into account that we are bordering adversary that is now conducting aggression in Ukraine, and understanding what kind of challenges it might bring in the long-term perspective. So to have a like-minded countries along the eastern border, it's important, and to be part of this like-minded club, that was one of the main reasons. I mean, from the outset, why we joined, and why we see the necessity to participate and be an active player. But not only geopolitics, I would argue, going further. I mean, investments also very important, and especially when it comes to the Three Seas Initiative Investment Fund, there are a lot of stakeholders who are now, I mean, even after the summit or business forum in June, now more actively trying to understand how to get those funds, how to acquire grants, to have funding for their businesses. Of course, those are big ones like Rare Baltic, energy sector, digitalization. One of the companies is very active and trying to find some cooperation partners in other regions. And last, but definitely not least, is also the US factor. And definitely that
Mm-hmm.
was also one of the added value or one of the outcomes of the Riga summit. Well, actually, that was on the highlights of the day. I mean the U.S. commitment to allocate 300 millions for the Three Cities Initiative Investment Fund. That was perceived as a very positive sign, and this is also the perception, I would argue, among the politicians here in Latvia, that without the U.S., without the strong involvement, and let's be frank here, without investments, the issue of the further development of Three Cities initiative is under the question, especially when it comes to the from Latvia's perspective. So basically, three main areas. So one is geopolitics, second is investments, acquiring funds and finances, and definitely US to well to get US here in the region. And this is one of also the
Indeed.
ways how to do that. I will
Increase the
stop here. I don't
presence.
know how
Well,
many minutes I had, but
it's
hopefully
it's
this
actually
is helpful.
very great. It's quite helpful because it sets the baseline for our debate as well. Thank you so much for a rich introduction. And you mentioned indeed that the private initiative plays an important role, but not only the private initiative from within, but also the partners to the west and to the east. But I mean regionally, of course. And for that, Owen, please. You sit currently in Estonia. You are a PhD researcher from the University of Tartu, but you have worked tremendously in the area of the Baltics. What is the perception of Estonia currently? I mean, we can argue that it agrees and it aligns with Latvia, but definitely Estonia has its own interest as well and would like to play a bigger role in the Three Seas initiative and as a security actor in the Baltics. So please, could you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, the Three Seas initiative is it's a very exciting initiative in Estonia. But as I'll get to, Estonia is a small state. Foreign policy, a very small state, 1.3 million people. Foreign policy resources there can get stretched very quickly in different directions. Um, when I think about this, I cast my mind back to, and I'm from Ireland originally. Don't forget, I cast my mind back to the era of when we had the Big Bang enlargement of 2004, and there was a lot of big expectations, major expectations in Central and Eastern Europe, among the Visegrad states, Poland, the Baltic states, that this was, some called that year 2004 the Fukuyama moment for Central and Eastern Europe, for the states that now currently comprise the Three Seas Initiative, in the sense that it was the end of history. They had rejoined the West fully, and they were fully integrated in Euro-Atlantic security institutions, in the European Union first of all, and then in NATO, probably even more crucially at the time. After that, there was a lot of EU investment, a lot of EU cohesion funding going into the region. Me being from Ireland, that funding was crucial a number of decades previously for Ireland in the 1970s and 1980s, and led to Ireland's, rapid economic progression. And I think many Central and Eastern European states at that time, 2005, 2006, looked towards Ireland, maybe saw what Ireland could do, and expected something similar. But of course, it was a very, very large enlargement. Proportionally, there wasn't as much EU investment to go around, even though EU investment was very significant, even if the expectations were rather large. That was also the time of the Iraq War and a little bit of incohesion in Europe with Central and Eastern European states taking the side of George W. Bush and not the side of Jacques Chirac and Gerhard Schroeder. They age well. um, at that particular time, and we had um, expectations, I suppose, that this strong support for the United States could lead to more US investment in Central and Eastern Europe in the region, which there was some disappointment that maybe US investment in the region wasn't as great, didn't turn out to be as great in the decade after 2004 as might have been expected previously. We have more
Indeed.
chances. Life is full.
Indeed.
Life is full of second chances. Now, so if I can just move on, 3 more points. So connectivity and equalization and infrastructure is crucial economically to, you know, and investment to ensure equalization with the economic infrastructure in Western Europe. So we don't have economic disadvantages with transport costs, with the free movement of people, with the free movement of services in the East like we do in the West. So infrastructure crucial, equalization crucial, and the Three Seas initiative. Some criticize it. Some of its critics would say that it creates a kind of a club within the European Union. But we also need a focus to bring that wider cohesion. We need to focus on different regions, and this brings a very clear focus and a very clear gathering ground for wider EU investment, for even transatlantic investment as well. Also, you must remember that I'm a defense and security analyst primarily. So also infrastructure in the region, logistics, transport in the region is crucial for NATO's mobilization. You know, civilian infrastructure that can be later used if a crisis escalates to move NATO assets from west to east at short notice. So bridges, roads, rail connections, all those connections are primarily civilian connections, transnational connections that can be used for deterrence along NATO's eastern flank in a crisis. So investment in civilian infrastructure is not only an economic investment, but is also a security and defense investment. And we need to think about the Three Seas initiative in that regard as well. So the last point I will make is about Estonia. So as I started, Estonia is a very small nation, does a lot with its foreign policy resources, but still these resources are limited. And Estonia is a little bit torn. And I was at a conference in Helsinki yesterday where the focus was on the Nordic states, but they are also now the Nordic states, they were a little bit hesitant, even though there's a lot of economic investment, Nordic investment in the Baltic states. They're now very, or more interested now with Finland and Sweden joining NATO, with building stronger political bridges with the Baltic states. So where do we now look with the Three Seas initiative? Rather than talk about an eastern flank and Central Eastern Europe down into the Balkans, how do we maybe integrate this new angle of Nordic cooperation onto the Three Seas initiative with Finland and Sweden joining NATO and throwing their focus more towards the Baltic states and down further south towards Poland? So I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, it's fantastic. It's once again, it's quite a rich introduction, and I mean, you are right. I mean, the PESCO mobility, for instance, in the Baltics and in the Nordic, it's definitely important and could be fruitful under the framework of the Three Seas initiative. Now, we will definitely talk about the U.S. role in this regard, also China and Russia presence in the region, more in advance as we go through the panel. But before we do that, I would like to turn to Maciek Szostak. Please, Maciek, you are also a young expert in this regard, and in particularly on the Polish perspective. Now, we have seen since the inception of the Three Seas initiative, Poland has played a great role in not only proposing the idea, but also pushing its further development. Now, with the question of Ukraine and the war and the situation in the eastern flank as well, we see Poland focusing in different points. Recently, we have Poland focusing more on the fortification of its border along the Belarus, the influx of migrants. But then still, what role can we see or what role can we expect in Poland in the next few, let's say, months? I mean, Poland will be definitely concerned with the question of energy, gas, migrants, politics. Next year, we also have the elections. So what is your analysis? What is your intake on this?
You asked me a lot of questions in this speech,
Yes.
so I think I would start with just saying a few words about the security issue with Ukraine, because I think that the previous goals of the Free Cities Initiative, which is transport, energy sector, and digitalization, it's gonna be fulfilled by this question of the security of Europe, because for me personally, and I think for all those countries within the Free Seas Initiative, the Russian aggression on Ukraine is the biggest challenge. That it puts the different challenges a little bit behind, but I think Poland can also play a very important role in this sense of the military security. We are, as I remember, the biggest economy of the Free Seas Initiative, so we have to take some sort of responsibility of it. Of course, there is also an issue of the NATO. Poland is frontier country of the NATO. We have some bases of the American soldiers, and right now we are heavily investing in our military. There are some contracts signed with the South Korea. We are buying equipment from the United States and from other directions. And in this sense, I think Poland can still play a leading role in this sense of Free Seas Initiative, but also in the security aspect, because defending the eastern flank would be, in my opinion, at some point put on Poland. So in this case, especially for the Baltic states, cooperation with Poland might be a strategic choice. Asking about the future elections, I think the cooperation in this area is important for all the parties that are currently running in the elections, but it might have changed the name, it might be different format, because the Free Seas Initiative was started by the Polish and Croatian president. And Polish President Andrzej Duda played a huge role in it. So it might be not so useful for the opposition to continue this format, but they had their own previous Eastern Partnership format. It conduct most of the countries that are right now in the Free Seas Initiative. So in my opinion, the cooperation will remain, but it might change a format exactly. It might be some differences in it. And when we talk about the energy sector, I think the Poland did tremendous job on securing their own demands of the energy. Building the terminal of LNG in Świnoujście was a huge step forward. It was started by the previous governments. It's now ended by this government. So this is a great success. Also, finishing pipeline from from the Norway. It's also it's giving really good position to Poland in this case. So right now, when Poland's demand of the energy supplies is kind of safe, we can try to export it. Right now, we just signed a deal with the United States and the South Korea for the building first nuclear power plant in Poland. It also might be very helpful. And in this case, there are also investments towards the Baltic states. There is a pipeline built to the Lithuania. The terminal, the refinery in Możejki, it's going to be a huge. It's going to increase the capacity, and it's going to help us to secure the Baltic states energy sector. As I remember correctly, the Estonia and also the Latvia decided to build their own LNG terminals. So in this case, I think in a few years, as a region, we will be fully independent on the Russian gas or oil.
Thank you very much for your point of view. And actually, it allows me to move towards my next question, Martins. Indeed, well, one of the biggest priorities for the members from the Three Seas Initiative is definitely energy. I mean, we cannot disregard the fact that infrastructure and also digitalization and cybersecurity plays a major role. But at the current stage of affairs, energy security plays a major or a center role. So in this regard, indeed, Latvia, as you said, Maciek, has proposed to build its own LNG terminals to complement the storage capacities. So, Martins, what can you tell us about, or what can you share about this? What are the opportunities of actually succeeding at this, but also, and very important, what are the challenges? And I think we worry more about the challenges and the future repercussions of this.
Yeah, well, this is the hot potato actually also here in Latvia this year. I mean, energy, and let's be frank and honest, also from my side here. When it comes to the gas, we were 90% dependent on importing Russian gas. That has changed, and the parliament, the outgoing parliament, approved the law stating that from the 1st January 2023, we are not importing Russian gas at all. So this is a big transforming element when it comes to the energy policy of Latvia. Well, you can ask me why we were still dependent on Russian gas. There are a lot of reasons. First and foremost, because of the lobby, because of the price, and I would even argue because of the successful approach of Russia when it comes to providing some elements to particular political parties here in Latvia when it comes to the energy policy. But yes, we have decided from 1st of January to not import any gas from Russia. And there are still questions when it comes to the LNG terminal among Baltic states and especially Estonia, how to move forward, because as you rightly pointed out, Lithuania has acquired already a US LNG terminal. There is a plan to have a common Estonian, Latvian, or within the Baltic region, at least additional one. Now the estimate is that the LNG terminal that is located in Lithuania, it can cover 80% of the needs of the Baltic states. So this is kind of a midterm solution. Of course, there are EU energy policy, but those are more long-term decisions and in long-term perspective. So the most demanding is this winter. We bought gas from Russia when the price was very at the peak, I would even argue. So we are now paying for that. There are a lot of, or as much as necessary, gas in our storages. So this winter is kind of a settled down, but when it comes to the next one, definitely the issue of the LNG terminal is still open, but no final decision made here in Latvia. So definitely that would be the new government, new parliament that will decide on that particularly.
Indeed.
This
And
is
actually,
an
on
important.
that note, well,
Yep.
my apologies. We still have the question of the challenges, but we're going to return to the note of this new parliament. Sorry, please. So what are the challenges that you see in this regard?
So basically, yeah, still this is the challenge. When it comes to the next winter, not this one even, I would argue but in 2-3 year period, this is definitely a challenge how to get all the necessary energy resources. Of course, we have solar, wind projects coming up, but those are again long-term perspective. So LNG terminal is definitely one of the solution, and still not the final decision made on this one.
Right. Thank you. And I wanted to do a greater emphasis, or I would like to emphasize what you mentioned about the parliament. So Latvia parliamentary elections round up in the beginning of October. So in previous years, we saw a great support or an introduction of a strong Latvian, let's say, support for the Three Seas Initiative. Can we expect the same in this parliamentary term, or can we expect sort of like a change from the Latvian perspective?
No, because surprisingly, actually, from one side, that the political party, the Unity Party, that was forming coalition last 4 years, won the elections despite all the crisis we went through during the 4-year period. So they were successful to even gain much more than they gained 4 years ago. And Prime Minister Krišjānis Kariņš, who was also one of the hosts of the Three Seas initiatives, and believer in Three Cities initiative, I think that definitely we cannot expect any change. I would even argue that probably from his perspective, that would even be even strengthened. I mean, strengthened Latvia's activities, believing in Three Seas initiative, believing what can we gain from this initiative, so on and so forth. So from this perspective, no change, and even positively towards Three Cities initiative.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm sure that it's great to hear that we have a participating country so enthusiastic as well. I mean, Maciek already pointed out that still, whether the opposition wins or not, there's still a vision to continue this. Now, I would like to turn to Owen now on the Estonian perspective. Now, Estonia, you mentioned it is a country that has a foreign policy very present in security and defense affairs. I mean, we know Estonia, who is renowned for their detailed capabilities. Now, indeed, Estonia could play a big role in, let's say, bringing forward or pushing for this digitalization under the framework of the Three Seas initiative. However, is it actually its concern at the moment? Does Estonia actually would like to further push this in the current state of affairs, knowing that they have a common threat at the moment, knowing that they will face an increasingly challenging winter? What can we expect for next year's summit on the Estonian perspective?
Well, this is interesting as well because we will have an Estonian election in the spring, I think in March or April. Either one of those months. It's usually Estonian elections are usually in March, and there will be, depending on the coalition that's formed after that election, there will be some slight variance in how different parties look at the region. Whether Estonia looks north or whether it looks more to the south. So certainly, to answer your question in a short and sharp way, that after Brexit, Britain was actually a major partner economically for Estonia, for Tallinn, and that they were in the years before Brexit, there was lots of economic contact, a lot of kind of twinning, if you will, between British investors and say the tech sector in Tallinn, and the British embassy here in Tallinn was doing a lot of great work on that. They were very, very interested. But now, of course, Brexit happened. Britain was a great champion when it was in the European Union of the digital single market, as was Estonia. So they were kind of kindred spirits in that kind of way. So Estonia is now looking around for new partners inside the European Union to promote, to upload its digital agenda, particularly in the area of digital public service, of digital public administration, e-governance, of which Estonia is probably the world leader. So as usual, in Estonia looks north. To the Nordic countries, they share a lot of that digital agenda. But of course, there is plenty of room for that agenda to prosper in the south, and there is growing interest. I think in the early days of Estonia's digitalism, Estonia among the Central and Eastern European states was clearly a leader, and it was looking for Western partners. But now, thanks to initiatives like the Three Seas initiatives, it just gives Estonia another forum, another consultative dialogue, and another place to promote and to upload this agenda. And of course, the Central and Eastern European states have come more and more around to this digital agenda. So there's lots more interest there. So I would expect that Estonia's digital agenda will be very, very high on the priority list at the next Three Seas Initiative Summit.
Thank you, Owen. In this regard, you mentioned the UK, but what about the United States? Do you believe, I mean, or based on your analysis and obviously your knowledge in this regard, what kind of presence can we see from our partners on the other side of the Atlantic? Do we actually see their support materialized? I mean, they have pledged quite an, from the investment fund, for instance, they've pledged to further invest since 2016. But do we actually see a strong presence? I mean, we know that just yesterday they had the midterm elections, so they're kind of focused on the domestic policy at the moment. They also have the the security and defense. And definitely, the US has been quite critical, but also very supportive to increase or to autonomize, let's say, Central and Eastern European countries. What is your intake on this?
So I probably come at probably as per my life profile, I suppose. I come at this with a little bit of an Irish Estonian focus. So Estonia previously under the Obama administration, things under Trump were, in terms of digitalism, had to take a backseat because the Estonian diplomats were very the the Estonian Minister of Defense at the time, Jüri Luik, he once said about Trump, when Trump was very skeptical towards the Baltic states, we have to explain who we are all over again to the Americans. That was the fear for the first couple of years of the Trump administration. With the enhanced forward presence, Trump, of course, operationally kept that going, augmented that operationally in the enhanced forward presence in terms of hard security. As you know, in Poland, the US presence grew under Trump. But then again, Trump being the wild card that he was, some would say is, with a perspective on the future, that then at the end, rumors come out that he's threatening to withdraw the United States from NATO. So Trump was a real wild card for everyone and for Estonians. When we look at in terms of defense, so the digitalism, there was a lot of progress made, particularly on Estonian US collaboration with e-governance technologies and e-state, and Estonia was a real contributor there. Estonia was kind of the leader in proposing these solutions that could modernize US public administration, which really was a matter of pride after 25 years of the United States helping Estonia with its state building, with its security and its development, that Estonia could give something back in that regard. But taking a more private sector look at things, I mean, and I look at it from an Ireland, we have a very big tech industry, lots of foreign direct investment. My sister works in the tech sector back in Dublin, so I keep a kind of a casual interest on these things. That Silicon Valley, other technology investment companies are looking more and more to Central and Eastern Europe, and not just Estonia. We've had a burgeoning boom in the tech sector here. I'm sitting in Tallinn right now. In Tallinn over the last decade, a lot of foreign direct investment, a lot of people moving here from other countries to work in Estonia, to work in the tech sector, because it's very, very attractive. And there's a lot of best kept secrets in the region. I once looked up FDI and tech sector development for another project in Vilnius, and I was very, very surprised to see how rapidly that sector was going. I've in the security and defense field, I have colleagues in Poland. I once went to visit them in Łódź, 100 kilometers outside Warsaw, and I was amazed at how Łódź had been transformed in a decade by technology investment. So probably Estonia, they say it's always very, very hard, because when a technology company, when a startup grows into something bigger, they'll always look somewhere else. They'll outgrow Estonia, they might outgrow Central and Eastern Europe, and they look to London, and then when they reach another value, they leave London and they look to Silicon Valley. That's just the natural progression of things. So keeping these companies, growing these companies in the region is still a challenge. Again, investment through the 3Cs initiative is something that can see that prosper. And of course, something where a bigger market, a bigger economy like Poland can have a key role. And Poland is one of the best kept sectors. I mentioned Łódź, Warsaw, Poland. There's great scope. There's already a lot of progress being made, but there's great scope to further develop the technology sectors in these companies. Great talent in the region, very flexible labor forces, great education systems, and cost efficient right now in terms of access to markets. So a lot of potential that is there, and it needs to be capitalized further on. And the 3Cs initiative, I think, is an excellent platform for which to do that.
Thank you once again, Owen, and also for the transition, because now we will focus on Poland, Maciek. Now, we see definitely in Poland exactly this. So it is becoming a hub. Not only Poland has become a regional, let's say, power now, is growing with its growing presence, but also as a regional hub for precisely this startups, companies where investment is flourishing, but also we have external actors playing a role. And by actors, I mean China. And China has already, with its Belt and Road Initiative, played a major role and also has questioned the capacity of states to say no and to say yes to different type of investments. And it comes in the private sector, well, predominantly in the private sector. So, Maciek, please, could you elaborate about what is this stand of Poland vis-a-vis China? Since predominantly Poland is also known that it has placed some sort of balance between complying with its American partners, but also complying with EU standards, but at the same time leaving some room with cooperation in the private sector with China. So please, Maciek.
I would put it this way: that Poland had some opportunities with cooperation with China, especially when this format of right now I think 16 plus one was started. But to be honest, at this point, I don't think this cooperation with the United States gonna allow us to also cooperate on a big scale with China. Belt and Road Initiative, and especially this format 16 plus 1, got last meeting in 2019. Since pandemic, there were no big events in this format, no big activities in Poland. So from Poland's perspective, this is kind of a dead end. Nothing more to look into it. But from the perspective of the private sector, of course, it's going to be very interesting because China is a rapid growing economy, one of the biggest economies in the world. So, of course, in this sense, this is opportunity for Poland. But I do not believe it's going to be an equal cooperation. The Chinese can imagine a situation when they import some commodities to Poland, they import some technology to Poland to build roads, to do infrastructure investments, but I do not think that they will allow Polish business going into China, especially the Polish business, because of the scale, is just too small. Many Polish businessmen that try to open their businesses in China cannot fulfill the demand that actually the Beijing demands, or the business there demands. So in this case, I do not think that China will be a great opportunity for Poland, and our cooperation in the field of military and nuclear sector with the United States, I think it's closing the door for China in Poland.
Thank you, Maciek. Well, not only Poland, but also Japan, for instance. And now I turn to Martins. A few weeks ago, the Baltic signed an agreement with Japan to strengthen further their cooperation. So I would like to ask the same question. First, about Japan. How do we further see this cooperation flourishing or growing? And the second one is China. I mean, is it recurrent a topic of Chinese investment, and could this be a threat for the Baltics under the framework of the Three Seas Initiative?
Well, two important questions. I will start with the later. On China, we were so the first one, Lithuanians, and then Latvians and Estonians withdrew from the 16, 17 plus one format, basically because of the I would argue two aspects. First one is the security concerns, and the second one is U.S. policy towards China, and fully understanding the policy of U.S. And being a credible ally, or trying to play a role as a credible ally. I think that was inevitable that all three Baltic states at some point will withdraw their participation from the 60, 70 plus one. On the security, I mean, what has been reported also by officials of the Ministry of Defense, and also from the cyber units, that actually there has been an increasement of activities when it comes to the cyber activities. Of course, the issue of attribution is still relevant, but kind of leaning that it's coming from the east, and not only Russia, but also also China. The issue of Huawei 5G was also very important here in Latvia, discussing potentially China's role and what kind of security challenges it brings. So this is interrelated. I don't see that we will further strengthen or find new ways how to strengthen the cooperation with China because of the political security issues. Having said that, we were actually in 2016, we were the ones who were hosting 16+1 summit here in Riga, and there was a hope that we can have a good on confidence and transparency built relations with China, but things has changed dramatically in recent years. So Japan, yeah, but well, this is more like intent, and I would perceive that from the geopolitical rather than from economic perspective. Japan is not playing a significant role when it comes to the export or import. But again, to illustrate our position, to illustrate that Japan is our partner, we have the same kind of adversaries. This is perceived more from the geopolitical perspective.
Thank you. Well, indeed, I mean, but geopolitics cannot be detangled at the moment with business. So that's why it's also very relevant. I would like to ask one more question that it deals less with geopolitics but more about economics. You mentioned that Riga hosted also not only the Three Seas Initiative Summit but also the Business Forum. What is the general or the specific perspective or sentiment of the private initiative in Latvia? I mean, as a rather small country compared to Poland, we definitely need a strong entrepreneurship. So, what is the perspective in going also to other parts of Europe or to other parts of these members? I mean, can we expect Latvian companies to further invest, let's say, in Hungary or in Poland or even southern in Bulgaria?
Very important question, Katya, because going to the or organizing the Riga summit, there was thought that business, the main stakeholders of the business, will actually be involved and would be willing to participate in any kind of the business forum. But after the Riga summit, actually, one of the main lessons learned was that business found the possibilities. And I would argue the business forum as a side event of the Riga summit, Three Seas initiative, was a success story. A lot of them actually started to at least brainstorming with other big companies in Poland, in Estonia, or whatever, understanding that there is temptation at the political level to strengthen this initiative, and US is contributing 300 and more millions US dollars. There is a room for cooperation, and definitely that was a success story. So, and we also discussed with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs after the summit, and wrote actually even a book on that. So we have a publication at Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and the main conclusion is to survive or to get initiative running. Now it's time to get from the bottom up approach. I mean, if there will be temptation from the business, from the NGOs to cooperate within the initiative, that would lead to success of the initiative.
My apologies. I think I have a problem with my audio. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, now, sorry, my apologies. It just disconnected and I was not able to hear the last part of your answer, Martins. But indeed, my next question, and I don't think you address it, is how can we further propel this involvement of the private initiative? I mean, how can we do it? You mentioned that the business forum was successful within the framework of the Three Seas initiative, but how can we actually propel this motivation and push for investment. I mean, the fund part, I mean, the investment fund is one element for this objective. But then how can we bring together, for instance, also young entrepreneurship? Do we see it? Do we envision this possibility?
Is this the question for me or?
Yes, but because I'm not sure if I caught if you even mentioned it. I mean, it was solidly perhaps a whole
Well,
minute that I couldn't hear anything.
well, this is a challenging question. I don't think that there is a correct answer to that, but you have to work with the business environment. I mean, this is definitely what you have to do, and well, a lot of information campaigns, cooperations, discussions publicly on these initiatives could be helpful, and again business forum providing the platform, providing the forum to discuss with like-minded companies in other nations, that was indeed helpful. And I was even speaking with some of the representatives from the companies. They said, yeah, we at least started to think about that, because we have institution Altum who is dealing with all the grants, and now they are more and more active, more involved, and speaking with the companies. One issue, of course, is most of the projects are for the big companies, and you don't have a lot of them here in especially in Latvia when it comes to the energy infrastructure or connectivity. Another one is how to involve medium-sized companies, right? So this is also very challenging. But and again, to speak with the business environment, to provide the platform, to provide forums for such a discussions.
And thank you for this point that you mentioned, that normally the grants are for bigger companies. Now, Maciek has worked, I mean, he comes from the New Europe Foundation, and he has worked with different institutes, but also with different kind of people. And as a young expert, I would like to ask you, Maciek, I mean, do you see the necessity for this kind of grants or this kind of proposals or this kind of incentives to not only be available for medium-sized companies, but also for young entrepreneurships? I think that there is still a gap in this 3Cs initiative. I mean, we began with a big picture on geopolitics and about the project, but now let's focus on these specific points and formal about the actual practicity of the initiative.
Maybe to answer this question, I will say a few words about what we are doing in Europe Foundation, because we started our organization with idea of creating a cooperation within civic societies of the Free Seas Initiative. Because those things that are put on the governmental level, the infrastructure, the energy sector, the digitalization, the security issue, those are really big, really challenging problems that require a lot of financing. But in the democracy, you need public support for this kind of huge investments. And we decided that it's going to be a wonderful idea to make a civic connection between people on the really basic level, between those young experts, young leaders of the university societies, of the small NGOs, those who work in the social service. We try to make as much connection between them as possible. That's why we started NGO partnership for Free Seas Initiative, with this idea of creating this space for them to conduct a meeting, to exchange their opinions about the Free Seas Initiative and about the issues that they have, because most of those countries comes from behind the Iron Curtain. They were heavily dependent on the Soviet Union. So in this case, in many senses, they have the same issues in case of unemployment, universities, how education looks, how the private sector looks. So in this case, we think it's a great idea to make a cooperation between those people. That's why we also last 2 months ago hosted the Generation Freedom Conference. It was planned to be attended by people who were born after 1989. 89, after 99, those who were born after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and because their way of thinking is much different, the way of thinking of their parents or the grandparents. And in this case, I think those young people might surprise in this field of business, because they have a lot of wonderful ideas. They're ready to prove themselves that they are part of the Western hemisphere, Western countries, that they want to conduct in a capitalistic way great business, also socially friendly. Because I think for my generation, this is very important, for that the business that will be conducted in the future must have this green aspect and also social aspect. So it ain't gonna be like in the 90s when sometimes businessmen felt too much power and exploit their workers. And right now, I think those young people have a great opportunity, and the Free Cities initiative is also creating some possibilities for them. And I hope so that in the future they're gonna be even bigger.
Thank you, Maciek. I mean, I wanted to ask about the green element. I mean, the greening part of the Three Seas initiative, but I'm afraid we don't have that much time anymore. I would like to just ask one last question to Owen, but also ask it to Martins. Can the Three Seas initiative become the lifeline of Europe in energy security? I mean, could we actually expect the Three Seas initiative to become the leading hub of cooperation? I mean, at the moment, it is composed by 12 or 12 countries, but can we actually see this success story? Owen.
Well, I just briefly, because we don't have to. I I think, yes, necessity is the mother of invention here. We have in the past with all areas of cooperation, energy, sometimes military and defense cooperation, there is a lot of sometimes emotion. There is a lot of maybe not bitterness, but a little bit of suspicion, and a little bit, they say among the Baltic states, friendly competition in different spheres. Like the Latvians will want to have the LNG terminal that supplies 80% of the Baltic states, but Estonia will have an idea for another Baltic or terminal with LNG, and they'll have a priority with Finland. So not being afraid to share and not being afraid to trust. I think trust between the states in energy security is so important, but you have to trust. If you're Estonia, if it's a Latvian LNG facility, you have to have very, very good political relations. You have to have very, very strong trust. I think trust is crucial when we look at the history of this region. States with so much in common, often locked into the same predicaments together, like the energy predicament right now, where we need stronger security of supply. Mightn't even be about the physical assets. To get these things working, we need stronger trust between the region states. And that has been the Achilles heel for this region in the past throughout history. So working on that through dialogue, through cooperation, is crucial in crucial spheres such as the economy, such as energy and security and defense.
Fantastic. Thank you, Owen. It's always amazing. I'm always amazed to hear you so passionate about this topic. Martins, what is the Latvian perspective? I mean, can
Um,
the initiative?
glad that Owen started this discussion, and I can just continue. Definitely, trust is an important element. Let's remember there are still, I would argue, countries that have a bit or slightly different perspective, even when it comes to the assistance to Ukraine, right? When it comes to the relations with Russia, during the Riga summit, there was document signed by all parties that at that time still the issue of providing Ukraine status when it comes to the EU joining EU. But let's be frank, still there are different perspectives on various geopolitical issues. There are countries like Hungary, Austria, so on and so forth. And exactly what was mentioned already, here in the region, we have different perspective how to develop our energy policy, right? We cannot have a common approach perspective among three Baltic states. Not speaking about the whole Three Seas initiative. So this would be very challenging, although energy is one of the main priorities and one of the main, I mean, in long-term perspective, goals that could lead to that. But having said that, I mean, also related to the energy is the infrastructure, right? Investments in the infrastructure could facilitate also in the energy policy. So this is very important as well.
Indeed. I would definitely like to continue. However, our time has run up. We still have 5 minutes more for my quick conclusions. Well, dear gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for sharing your input. It has been quite rewarding, and I believe we have come to this sort of trust as well in the informal partnership. I mean, among think tanks. We truly appreciate it. Thank you very much for your input, and I would like to wish you a good continuation of the day.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
coming.
Thank you.